Good morning, everyone. I'm Representative John Autry from Mecklenburg County, House District 100, and I want to thank everyone for being here this morning as we kick off Clean Energy Day in Raleigh. Clean energy is a very important component of our future's economy here in North Carolina, to me personally, and it should be to every North Carolinian. I understand that today in that great fossil fuel legacy state of Oklahoma, there are more people working on wind turbines than are working on oil derricks anymore. So that kind of impact is profound, and certainly North Carolina, with its great institutions, has an opportunity to be a leader in the field of a clean energy. And I hope that we can continue to work to foster that economy and have a clean energy economy going forward for North Carolina, because we all sit in the shade of trees we didn't plant. And I'm hoping that my grandchildren will have some nice, healthy, strong trees that provide ample shade for them to fulfill themselves. So right now, let me introduce Mac Ledgerton, who will carry on with some more details about what we can anticipate for the day. Reverend Ledgerton. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I want to thank Representative John Autry for being here today and being such a support for the environment here in Raleigh, and he's known throughout the state for his care and commitment to our environment, and particularly its promotion as not only environmental protection and health, but also as an economic driver for the present and the future of our state. This morning I'm going to share a little bit about the new North Carolina Creation Care Network and why the faith community is becoming more involved in our environmental work in the state, working with the climate action organizations and justice organizations in the state, and share a little bit about the day and answer questions. I also have Karen Bearden here at the press conference as well. She is coordinator of the 350.org Raleigh chapter, and she will also be sharing with you about the 350.org campaign, and then we'll answer questions. So today we have the first Clean Energy Action and Justice Day here in North Carolina, and I serve as coordinator of the North Carolina Creation Care Network and serve on numerous state boards and steering committees with environmental groups as well as local. I live in Pembroke, North Carolina, which is the alleged terminus for the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and we'll address some of those issues in this press conference and throughout the day related to the challenges faced by not just one, but two pipelines now proposed in our state. I'd like to start by reading a statement from Reverend Dr. Rodney Sadler, who is a professor at Union Theological Seminary in Charlotte, North Carolina, and one of the co-founders of the North Carolina Creation Care Network. He could not be here today, but he issued this statement. As people of various faith traditions, we are all committed to a benevolent creator who made a good world in which we should all thrive, and who commanded us to care for the planet from which we were formed and all of its people. For this reason, above all others, it is imperative that we come together at this moment of creation crisis and work together to foster a better world. So today, what we have on our schedule is we're going to meet at Halifax Mall at 9 o'clock and begin our program, and then at 9:45 we're going to walk to 5 different government offices. Actually, we may stop at 4 and then take letters to the other. What we have done is identify 8 energy agents in the state, and over the next 6 months we're going to meet with all of them and work with them and talk with them about how we can work together to achieve 100% carbon-free renewable energy in our state. These 8 energy agents are first and foremost the governor and the legislature, the Department of Environmental Quality, the Attorney General, the Utility Commission, the Board of Surveyors, and the Board of Realtors. And then last but not least is Duke Energy. So we have letters here, and we're going to deliver them with some mason jars of clean water in North Carolina to our 4 or 6 leaders of the legislature, to our governor's office at the administration building, to the DEQ, and to the Attorney General, and to the Utility Commission. And I'd like to just review with you our major invitation that we're inviting our government officials to join us. And basically, many of the letters are the same with different roles and responsibilities particular to the agencies and the officials. So here are the highlights of our invitation. We invite you to join the interfaith community along with environmental and justice organizations in North Carolina in making a commitment to 100% carbon-free renewable energy. It is time for our beloved state to take seriously the call and challenge to make a full transition from fossil fuel to clean, renewable energy that is carbon-free. In order to make this responsible transition, we request that you, and this is to all of the officials, 1, support the suspension of all new carbon-based and fossil fuel energy resources and infrastructure for 1 year, including the proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and all further biogas and biomass development, use, and exportation. All of these energy sources are major producers of carbon emission. With their expanded development, our state will never be able to reduce our carbon emissions and achieve a low-carbon future. Second, authorize the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality to sponsor public hearings across North Carolina during this 1-year suspension, similar to those held in responses to specific permit applications, for the purpose of receiving public input and proposals on how we as a state can achieve the goal of developing and utilizing 100% carbon-free renewable energy with reliance on solar, wind, and geothermal energy production, storage, and consumption. The rest of our invitation in our letters propose how we would do this over the next year. This includes deferring carbon-based fossil fuel and non-fossil fuel carbon-based development, which includes biogas and biomass, that are also considered major contributors to carbon emissions. And this includes the protection of our forests from the production of wood chips that is largely being exported to Europe as an energy source overseas. During this 1-year delay, we also recommend to permit the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality to receive oral and written testimony on whether or not we need a bridge fuel as transition to a totally fossil fuel-free and carbon-free sources of energy. Furthermore, assess the need for the bridge fuel, and if the bridge fuel is needed, to determine what bridge fuel we would need during this transition. And we are confident that if this assessment is made, that our state will find that rapidly developing technology, storage capacity, and increased efficiency of renewable energy sources and declining costs will make a bridge fuel unnecessary, economically irresponsible, environmentally harmful, and impractical. And finally, I'd like to say, right now, private industry is determining public policy energy in North Carolina. What we have is a situation where the tail is wagging the dog. Duke Energy proposing the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and now the Mountain Valley Pipeline in cooperation with Dominion Energy, is basically stating that this is the fossil fuel that we need as a bridge fuel. Now, contrary to this understanding, carbon-based natural gas, so-called natural gas, is now known to be the most harmful of all fossil fuels, the way it is being extracted through hydraulic fracturing and piped under high pressure in pipelines throughout the rural areas of our nation, and burned and used and ultimately to be exported. This Atlantic Coast Pipeline is coming through our state. It's not going to end in Pembroke as it is alleged to. It is being continued to Hamlet right now to serve a major gas producing plant owned by Duke Energy through Piedmont Gas, and it is also going into South Carolina and will ultimately end up in Elba Island, Georgia, where it will be exported, and the price of this gas will significantly rise. So issues of consumer protection are the responsibility of our Utility Commission and our Attorney General's office. So not only is this gas being fraudulently represented in the appearance of fraud as being called clean, safe, and green energy, and the science now knows it is none of these, and in fact is the most dangerous fossil fuel over the first 10 to 20 years. This gas is 90% methane and ethane, and both of these are major sources of carbon. So it is actually factually impossible for any elected official or any industry leader to say they are committed to carbon reduction and a low carbon future while promoting the massive Atlantic Coast Pipeline and the smaller Mountain Valley Pipeline into North Carolina. So the next 6 months we are going to be educating and working in the faith community throughout North Carolina through the new North Carolina Creation Care Network, to hold meetings, to educate the public, to show the public the scientific facts about methane and ethane and its danger to North Carolina, to our nation, and to our planet, and point out the geopolitical nature of this gas. And I'd like to close with a quote from our own Senator Burr, who says it more eloquently and clearly that these pipelines, the major goal is to export this fuel. And he said this in 2015 for the Wilson newspaper. Senator Burr says, if we kept up energy production in this country and started shipping natural gas to Europe so that they are not relying on Russia, it would change the geopolitical landscape. We're set to address in the United States the greatest cost in competition, which is energy. We have the opportunity to see this for the next 50 years and increasing our production by building pipelines. It makes no sense, would be thought, Burr said, but I understand, not in my backyard. There is a difference. You put up the infrastructure you need, and the byproduct is its jobs. Now, the last fact I will share with you is that the renewable energy field produces significantly more jobs than the fossil fuel field. And those of us that live along this pipeline route and in eastern North Carolina, we have already decided what our contribution to the future of energy will be in this state, and it is solar energy. The majority of solar farms are being constructed in the east. They're providing jobs and a tax base for our rural counties without harming the environment, and supporting farmland, and wind turbines are now being placed on farms in the northeast and the farmers can get to continue to farm their land while the wind is blowing and energy is being produced above them. So I thank you for coming this morning. We have some of our team that will be with us all morning, and we hope that you would join us along the walk or at the rally. And in your packet is a copy of all of the letters that we will distribute today. We're also going to send these letters to every member of the North Carolina House and Senate, and really come and talk to all of our officials and all of our agencies to see if we can come up with a common politically viable solution to suspend work on all fossil fuel infrastructure for 1 year, defer it so we can have this dialogue in the public domain, and finally, as a public, decide how to achieve 100% carbon-free renewable future fuel and energy in the near future. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Karen Bearden, our coordinator for 350.org here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Thank you. And then we'll answer questions.
Howdy, y'all. My name is Karen Beard, and I'm the coordinator for 350 Triangle. As Max said, that's part of, we're one of the local chapters for 350.org. And welcome to our Climate Action Day, Justice Day, our Clean Energy Action Day and Justice Day here in Raleigh. And we have people from across the state that have been working on this. Yay, it's great for us to be collaborating together. So all connected with what we are doing today is 350.org kicked off our fossil-free campaign in last fall. And so it comes with 3 different steps. A fast and just transition to renewable energy. And we've already started this in North Carolina and the Triangle with 100% renewable energy resolutions that have been passed so far in 14 municipalities, including Chatham and Orange counties, town of Carborough, and the town of Hillsborough. We're currently working with Wake County and the city of Raleigh, and also the city of Durham and county of Durham are working, and also Chapel Hill will be starting with them in the fall. So there's good movement going on with 100% renewable energy locally here in the Triangle and throughout the state. Auburn has been really critical out in the western part of the state. Thank you, Auburn. And I also want to mention that last March, Representative Price C. Harrison and Representative John Autry, the first time I met him last year, they introduced the House resolution supporting a state goal of 100% clean energy by 2050 and the creation of green jobs. They passed that resolution. It's still there, it didn't go anywhere, but it will be going somewhere. Yes, it will be going somewhere. It's been introduced, and that's the important thing. So, okay, so 1, a fast and just transition to renewable energy. 2, no new fossil fuel projects. That's huge, and as Max said, that means no Atlantic Coast Pipeline, no Mountain Valley Pipeline, Governor Cooper and NCDEQ, no offshore drilling, no fracking, and no crazy oil and gas task force that they just passed this crazy bill that's taking us backwards. So very important to have no new fossil fuel projects and move us forward to 100% renewable energy, right? And then 3 is not a penny more for dirty energy. We need to divest from fossil fuels, and I know I've been talking here with the city of Raleigh on that. And people need to break up with their mega banks. As you all might remember back in 2016 when people from across the world were standing up with our amazing people in North Dakota and South Dakota against the Dakota Access Pipeline. And so that's when the divestment movement grew even more. And we had rallies downtown here at Wells Fargo and asking Wells Fargo to not fund the Dakota Access Pipeline. And they're also, unfortunately, Wells Fargo and Bank of America are 2 of the banks that are also funding this proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline. So we need to break up with your mega banks. So like Joe and I, my husband and I, have broke up with our Bank of America, and we've now are banking with Coastal Federal Credit Union. So we're encouraging people to do that. And then recently, this fall, and then really kicked off more so in January, there's a no fossil fuel money pledge. And so again, awesome Representative Pricey Harrison, awesome John Autry have signed on. They signed on quickly back in March when I asked. And so what they signed on to was, I pledge to not take contributions from the oil, gas, and coal industry, and instead prioritize the health of our families, climate, and democracy over fossil fuel industry profits. So our goal is to get more and more people across North Carolina, not just our state legislators, but our city councilors and commissioners, state, federal. So we're working on that. And so far there's over 600 from across the nation that have signed on to that resolution. So, and of course, part of that no money means no money from Duke Energy and Dominion Energy, of course. So I think that's all I have to say. But again, we need to move to 100% renewable energy. That's why we're here today. Thanks.
Karen, I have a question for you. Do you know how many metropolitan areas have already made a commitment and have a plan and a timeline to reach 100% renewable?
It depends on the numbers, but I think they're over 60 now. They're over 60 in the United States. But
How
we
about
have
in North Carolina?
Yeah, so there's 14 here in North Carolina.
No, there's 2 that have actually developed a plan to achieve that. There are 4, I believe there are 15 that have signed a resolution to do it.
Right.
My point is that we already have models in North Carolina how to proceed as a state. And these models that are already in place in these resolutions can also help inform our decision makers about how we need to move forward. And there's actually a number of plans that have already been presented by energy experts to assist us as well.
Right, like Mark Jacobson from Stanford University and Bill Powers in San Diego. But Bill Powers has created a program working with NC Warren. It's called Clean Path 2025, and I'm not the expert on that, but our 350 Triangle team is working, and what they're doing is they're starting like different county chapters on that. And so once our communities have passed these resolutions, we're using the suggestions and the literature, the experts, Mark Jacobson and Bill Powers, and helping our leaders as they move forward.
Of course, Duke Energy has kind of a stranglehold on this by law, because third-party sales are not allowed in North Carolina. So that's a nut that really has to be cracked in order for some of these resolutions to move forward, and we must work on that.
And that's exactly why we're calling for these public hearings around the state.
Yes.
We have amazing, knowledgeable people in this field of energy, and their knowledge and understanding is just not being utilized to help develop our public policy. So let's open it up from questions first from the news station, and then we'll open up questions from others before we need to go out to Halifax Mall.
I had a question for you, Reverend. I think this seems like it's one of the first big groups I've heard that's mixing members of our faith community with other leaders of organizations. Why are religious community members so important in this fight?
Well, the religious community really is the foundation for the vision and values of not only our faith communities, but our society. And this energy challenge and climate challenge and energy economy is the #1 issue facing all human beings in this time and age. Pope Francis, came forward in the Catholic community with this encyclical that is just so profound, and he really encapsulated the religious and spiritual reasons and motivation for why, as religious and spiritual people, we need to be the leaders to not just call on the protection of our communities and our people and the nation and the planet, but also to promote our renewable resources as the very gifts from our Creator that are here to produce energy for us, just as the plants give us energy and the animals give us energy when we eat. The sun and the wind and the water and the warmth of the earth and thermal are gifts that we're just not utilizing. And our modern industrial society is just addicted to extracting resources from the earth rather than treating the earth as the very source of life which we must sustain.
A finite resource, by the way.
Yes.
Exactly.
And as a more practical note, I would add that how can we afford our future if we continue to only invest in our past? So it's a practical point of what it means to make that step forward and to break that addiction from fossil fuels. And I would put to you also that the solution for correcting the mistakes of burning a century and a half of fossil fuels is not to just burn a different kind of fossil fuel.
Well, and see, here's the challenge. And if you read the letter that we're giving to the Attorney General, there are two research reports that have been done in the last 2 months that are released and are on the Alliance to Protect Our People and Places We Live website. One is the call to suspend. It's a major paper that I wrote on this subject. The other is a report by Nancy LaPlaca on the appearance of fraud and fraudulent misrepresentation of this fuel as being clean, safe, and green. And what we're facing is a similar situation than what we face with tobacco, that it's being marketed in such a way that the truth is just not being told or promoted. And we don't even feel that our elected officials understand that this is a carbon-based, methane is a carbon-based fuel, that because of the way hydraulic fracturing, up to 12% of all this gas is emitted into the atmosphere. When this gas used to just be taken and oozed out of a straw and put in trucks, we only lost 2 to 4%. And now the scientists, they started wondering, why is the temperature of the planet increasing so rapidly? On Sunday, the report was released that the ice in Antarctica is melting at 3 times the rate now that it was just 10 years ago. And the ocean warming, we're not being told the worst part of ocean warming. We hear about the rising of the seas, but we're not told that what lies at the bottom of the ocean is, again, frozen methane. And once the ocean warms up to the point that it begins to thaw, that frozen methane, that is equal to almost all the volcanoes erupting at the same time on the planet. When that frozen methane starts to thaw at the bottom of the ocean, there's no way we can stop it. And that's the tipping point that scientists talk about, but the media doesn't ever tell us. And I doubt that media reps even know that that's what the tipping point is. And I'm starting to preach. But it's so tragic. And the same way in which tobacco was marketed, this unnatural carbon-based gas is being marketed in the same way that provides a very serious appearance of fraud. And in the case of tobacco, 46 attorney generals across these 46 states in this nation filed a common lawsuit. And we're proposing that every small town, Representative Autry, every little town in this state, every large city, every rural county, and every place in the nation could come together and do the same thing as a nation that we did with tobacco, and get our states to outlaw hydraulic fracturing and work. And the hope is that because we outlawed fluorocarbons, the scientists have now told us that the hole in the ozone layer has closed up. So if our human behavior can change to the point that we can stop the very product that caused that hole to form, and now by getting out of the way, God has it so that, and nature has it so that it can heal itself if we just stop polluting. And unfortunately, we are going to have to do the same thing with this unnatural gas. And if we become dependent on one or two pipelines for 30 years, we'll never get there.
The complications around addressing the chlorofluorocarbon issue back in the 80s took a generation to correct and to get us on the correct path forward. My concern with the continued approach with fossil fuels is the time involved in the water cycle. A drop of water that fell out here in the streets of Raleigh this morning during that shower, it'll be 50 years before we see that water again. So the time it takes the water cycle to correct the actions that we're putting into our atmosphere is 5, 6 generations down the road. And so we don't have time to dance around this issue anymore. Or the future of the planet, I sometimes say that the planet doesn't want us anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's doing what it can to expel us. So we need some corrective behavior and some very forward-thinking corrective measures to address the issue that is perilous to human life on this planet. Any other questions?
Over here.
Yes.
We're going to need to go outside y'all, in a few minutes.
I
Yeah.
just want to say that, I believe it was 10 years ago, I came here with the Canary Coalition and under Avram's leadership. And he had written an incredible bill, tell me the name again, was the Affordable Energy.
I believe Representative Autry was one
Yeah.
of those co-sponsors.
And I remember, it's the only time I'd come from Asheville. I'd never lobbied anywhere before. And we went in, and honestly, I could say there were people on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, who supported this, but you know what they said repeatedly? Duke Energy is in my backyard, and I cannot do anything to help you or support this bill. And here we are, has it been 10 years at least since that happened? And I'm wondering, what do we do in a situation like that? How can we get this legislature behind us? Is that still their answer? Are we still hearing that same excuse today?
I'll offer you this. If you don't like the policy, change the policy makers.
That's what we're trying to do.
And so, but the time is now. To wait for another election cycle to make these changes is unconscionable. I can't imagine how much more the planet can take, and it will find a way to correct itself if we don't do it. And then we will be the lesser for not taking the action that we were certainly called to do, required to do, and should do. Okay.
I want to say it gives me great encouragement to hear you speak out
Exactly.
in a strong, very strong voice that you're speaking. Thank you very much. You're giving me hope that that maybe the legislature will be a useful instrument in dealing with these changes that have to be
Don?
made.
It only took them 14 days last year of the legislative session to start mocking me for talking about these issues.
Well, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have, it's a general and a specific question, I guess. I was very encouraged with our governor soon after being elected joined other governors in supporting the Paris Accords. What can be done to hold him accountable for that? That was an action that was public and that he is still consulting with these governors, even though I know nothing's perfect. So questions can be raised about that as well. But it seems to me that that was an action taken on behalf of the environment, behalf of the citizens, and yet I don't see much coming forward to hold him accountable for that decision with the Paris Accord.
Concerning the fact he is.
Well, I would be totally out of my lane and out of my realm of knowledge to try to speak for what the governor's office is or isn't doing. I would just say this: in order for him to be effective in this realm, he needs support in this building. Because it will be the actions taken in this building that will make the difference for the long term of North Carolina.
So we supporting the legislature can help him support the Paris Accords.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And what we want to create is a big tent. A big tent, and in religious terms, a big temple. We need a big temple in which the environment and the economy and our communities are the central value and focus. And when we create that, then we can use our influence and be heard in a more significant way. And that's why this new network has joined with so many of the climate action organizations to organize and motivate and arouse the faith community in the state.